The Rescue by Janie Whitney. Ruby's walk began with two good omens, the silver birches in the first aura of new foliage, and a pair of grey goshawks in a blackwood tree. Breathing in the sweet September aroma of gum nuts and wood smoke, she continued strolling along the riverbank and noticed a couple of figures approaching from the other direction. The woman bore a strong resemblance to the late Queen, and her companion, my God, she thought, he could be my Jack's twin brother. Trying not to stare, Ruby slowed and said, "G'day," but received a frosty vibe in return as they passed by. Deflated, she arrived home, sank into Jack's old armchair, and gazed into the empty fireplace. It was getting chilly, but why bother lighting it just for herself? Oh, what she'd give for just one more night snuggled up with Jack. The drama of blazing logs, music. The cancer had invaded his body before Ruby realised anything was wrong. Jack had never been one to complain. It was just a few months after the diagnosis that she'd collected his ashes. Sighing, she switched on the ABC News and dozed off before Vera started. A few weeks later, she saw the same two again and tried to ignore them. Jack's look-alike, however, glanced at her as they passed, and looking into his eyes, she could have sworn that their souls recognised each other. Buoyed by this private interaction, when she arrived home, she selected an album from her eclectic collection and even thought about kindling a fire, but decided to dance instead. 70s rock was pumping out of the speakers and she was shaking her silver curls to the beat when she realised someone was banging at her door. "Can you turn that bloody racket down?" It was that killjoy Arthur from next door. Miserable old git. Mood killed, she reminisced about the time her friend Dawn had lived next door and thought, Dawn would have marched in and danced with me. Remembering the night Jack had joined them on the old Persian rug made her smile. He was a terrible dancer, and they'd all ended up in a tangle of limbs on the floor, and from then on Jack was banished to his chair on music nights. Dawn was in a care home now. In earlier years, they talked about what to do if diagnosed with old-timers. Dawn had a friend who'd sourced a banned book from America, and she'd learned which pills to take for a painless death. Dawn and Ruby had both secretly accrued the medication, just in case. Dawn used to say, "They're not going to lock me up in a bloody old people's home just to piss and shit myself to death." She was in her late 60s when it became obvious that her memory was slipping, but her plan was thwarted when her daughter stepped in. This was not going to happen to Ruby. She knew what to do if her mind started to go. She'd take her favourite blanket, because she wanted to be warm for her final sleep, the pills, a bottle of Bailey's, and her iPod, and go for a long walk into the rainforest. She'd find a creek with a soft mossy bank. Pink Floyd was her current choice of exit music, but that changed all the time. She looked around her lounge room, the setting of years of good times and laughter, and realised that it no longer felt like home. No, not without Jack, and not without Dawn. Ruby thought briefly about her pill stash, but she wasn't done yet. She still felt like a young woman inside. Anyway, hadn't she always wanted to live near the ocean? It was time to hit the road. It didn't take long to sell. Conjoined cottages had become fashionable. She traded her Civic for a groovy yellow Combi, and on the last day of summer, with an unexpectedly heavy wallet, she pulled out of her driveway for the final time. Deciding to do a lap of the neighbourhood for old time's sake before heading east, it was when turning left into Wattle Crescent that she saw the Queen look-alike stride out from a driveway, then head down the footpath. Ruby slowed down to a stop and watched the woman disappear into the distance. Somewhere, deep in her subconscious, she knew she was about to make an unwise decision. But what if Jack's double was in the garden? Surely one last glimpse wouldn't hurt. The garden was manicured to perfection, which left her cold, to be honest. There was no sign of him, but then she noticed a flash of white behind the palings of what looked like some kind of cage in the top right corner of the property. Trespassing was against the law. She could be done for all kind of misdemeanours, if caught, but she couldn't help herself. The enclosure looked shoddy and out of place in the otherwise regimented landscape. It had a very bad vibe. Ruby didn't believe in God or pure good or evil, but when she looked into the cage, she wished that Queen look-alike a painful eternity in hell. The bull terrier was trembling, ears down and tail between his legs, and wearing a choker collar that was attached by a short chain to a dilapidated wooden kennel, no blanket, a half-full bucket of filthy water, thinking, why the fuck would that vile old bitch tie him up when he's already in a cage? She opened the gate and stepped over mud and old feces to reach him. He cowered, but Ruby put out her hand and eventually he sniffed it. She gently stroked his neck. Up close, he still looked like Jack, but the brindle patch was around his left eye instead of the right. Plus, there was a black tip at the end of his tail. She glanced back across the lawn at the combi. "Come on, boy," she said, unclipping the chain. "Let's go to the beach."